So, we're good? Yeah, good. This is just like a cup form that I've thrown a little on the thick side because I want it to be a mug. And I think it's important to have your mugs maybe just like a touch thicker than your cups because of insulation purposes, but also when you're adding a handle to it, you are really manipulating the surface and kind of pressing and compressing that handle to make sure it attaches well. And you can really warp the form. So I think having it just like a touch thicker helps firm it up and give it a little bit more stability. So this is just a simple kind of form. I'm going to add one handle type to it, but I'm going to show you guys two handle types today. The first one, I will just get out a little bit of fresh clay. And we're going to roll out the coil. First do this by hand. And what I have here before I actually get started is a little bit of slip. So I collected this from the pieces when I was on the wheel throwing. Just collect them in this little plastic cup. Kept it wet so that it retains its slipness. So I'm just going to squeeze this out to a large coil, and I'll roll it, get it round. And I'm going to roll this. Try to keep it as round as possible for now. And I'm rolling it to, I'd say, maybe roll it on me right now. I'd say it's about 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch thick. Okay. So that's good. And I want it to be pretty even because once I start to manipulate it, I'm going to put it on the mug and I don't want to touch it. Because once you start touching it, you're going to like change its shape and you'll have like little indentations. And I want this to be nice and smooth. Not that like touching it and like adding those is like totally a bad thing. You can do that. That might fit like your aesthetic and like what you want to do with your pieces. But I'm trying to avoid that with this piece. Alright, so I'm going to cut this off. And cut off a little bit of the edge. And I'm going to flatten that. So I've got this other clean back. Press down straight on top of it. And give it a little tap. Try to keep it nice and flat. And if I feel like one side is lower than the other, then I'll press down on the other side. So this side feels a little bit lower. I'm going to press down on this side to kind of like even it out and flatten it a little more. Okay. I'm going to twist this a little bit because it's kind of gets stuck. Slide it off. There we go. Slide it off. This is going to act as kind of like a thick strap handle, right? Just picked up a little bit of clay from the table. If I can smooth that out. So, I think it's important to really pay attention to the thickness of your handles. Some of them are if they're really thin, it can feel like you actually don't have control of your mud, So be careful that you don't want to make them too thin. If they're too thick, then they're going to feel kind of like wonky in your hand, and you're not going to want to use that mug. So I want you to kind of think about functionality and how pieces work. So all right, so I'm kind of smoothing this over a little bit with my hands. I'm going to grab my mug. My mug is, I'd say, mid leather hard. So it's kind of firm. It's mid to late leather hard. If if you start to attach the handle too soon, you'll really change the shape of this and warp it, right? So we're trying to avoid that. So I want it to get stiff enough to where I can actually attach this. So cut this off nice and smooth, and I'll start to place this. I know I want it to loop out somewhere up in here and loop down and hit the mug right below this edge, like I've done with these other two mugs. So when these they're different, but they're similar, right? So kind of working in that vein. I'm also paying really close attention to the distance between the cup, right, the wall, the outer wall, and the inside of the handle. If it's really far between those two, like over like 1.5 inches or so, it can kind of feel like you're like holding the mug like out here while you're drinking it. If it's too close, then your fingers can't slide in behind it. So there's like this happy medium that you have to kind of like discover. So I just keep holding it up next to it and trying to approximate how big my handle needs to be. So when I'm bending this too, some cracks start to develop because the clay is a little stiff. The clay that I use to make the handle. So as I'm bending it, I'm kind of actually compressing that area right there, and I'm smoothing it out without any water. Cut a little more off. About right, but it's the wrong angle. So I want this handle to meet the cup, right? At this angle. Can you guys see that? So I need to actually carve this base and the top here to reflect the curvature of the cup, right? And also the angle at which it's hitting it. So there's two things I'm thinking about as I'm cutting it. So I'm gonna cut just a slight little curve out of the top of the handle. And the reason why I'm doing this is I want as much surface area, much contact between the handle and the cup, because it's a pretty strenuous juncture between a wheel thrown piece and a hand-built piece. Next to it. Let's see, I think that is close enough. All right, can you guys see that? All right, so I'm going to slide my fingers in between there, make sure there's enough space. Okay. So now what I want to do is get it positioned exactly where I want it to be before I attach it. So once I get it exactly how I want it to be in its place, I will trace around it. Okay, so I know where to score exactly. All right. Score in there. And then I'm going to score the handle. And because I use fresh clay and it's a little on the stiff side, I don't have to wait for the handle to set up. If I'm pulling a handle, and you guys will see this in a different video, if I'm pulling a handle, I'm adding a lot of moisture to the clay, so it's really soft and wet, right? And I don't want to just attach it to the side of the piece because A, it won't hold its form, but B, it's going to be a lot wetter than the cup. And I'm really trying to get these married up at the right time, so that way the moisture content in the handle is similar to the moisture content in the cup, okay? These can be maybe a touch wetter, and that's pretty common, but you don't want it to be too much wetter. Or too dissimilar, because remember, these will all shrink, right? So if this handle's too wet and this cup is dry, the handle's going to shrink more than the cup has already shrunk, right? because the cup is already dried a little bit. And so what will happen is this will pop off, or you'll see a big crack, and sometimes they'll fall off, which is a really extreme case. But either way, it's something we want to really try to avoid. Okay, all right, so now I have that. I'm gonna go ahead and add my slip. Just a little dollop of slip there, a little dollop of slip here. And I'm going to attach this really firmly. On the inside though of the cup, I'm going to press out slightly, so that way I can really compress this and really push that in. And I'm going to really press in down at the base. And my cup, it's pretty stiff like I said, right? So it can withstand a little bit of this. But it's real important that you really compress those spaces, okay? Because you really want to avoid any cracking. Okay, so from here, I usually like to clean off the slip with my hand. There's a little bit excess, we'll squeeze out around that seam, okay? And then I'll take my wooden tool. I think it's good to use a wooden tool because it compresses a little better. It's really stiff. And I'm just joining that, pressing a little bit of clay from the handle into the seam, or into the cup, sorry. And I go around the whole entire piece. And I'll take a little bit of fresh clay, make a small little coil out of it. Really skinny little coil. Okay. Put that in a little bit of water, and I go around this whole seam with that. Just fill it in. And this clay really helps support this seam. It thickens that clay where you might have pushed into the cup and grabbed some from the handle, so it fills in that void, that little valley, essentially, right? And since it's nice and soft and wet, I can actually just smooth it in right away into the handle and into the cup. And I like to smooth it out. Some of you might want to just smooth in one side. I've got some examples I can show you guys of that. And I'll get rid of some of these little cracks. I'm supporting the inside of it here as I'm pressing on the handle. But that's pretty much it for the top, okay? Now I'll do the exact same thing for the bottom seam, but you can see I'll smooth that over a little bit more once the clay kind of sets up a little bit. But that's the essentials of putting on a handle, okay?